Ascent to the Mountain of Visions in Medjugorje. Like every other Sunday, Father Slavko Barbaric, accompanied by pilgrims, is on his way to the spot where a supernatural occurrence took place in 1981. The Mother of God appeared to 6 children. The small country village became an international place of pilgrimage. The Franciscan priest has accompanied the seers and their visions most of the time. The messages of the Gospel, as the Mother of God is called here, have become his life's work.
U ime Otca I Sina I Duha Svetoga, Marijo Kraljice mira, Gospa Majka moja, Kraljica mira, Gospa Majka moja, Kraljica mira, Gospa Majka moja,
In the meantime, over 20 million pilgrims have been here, and the international mass media has made the village in Bosnia-Herzegovina famous worldwide.
Hier haben die Seer erstes Mal die Mutter Gottes gesehen von der Straße.
This is where the Seers saw the Mother of God for the first time from the street down there. The second time they ran here because they saw the same figure again. That is how the first encounter took place. People ran after them and saw the Seers on their knees, praying.
This was an occurrence that would repeat itself daily. The children could not only see the Gospel during her appearance three-dimensionally, they could also speak to her, and most importantly, they received messages from her on a regular basis. The Seer children, as everyone suddenly called them, were normal farmers' children in their teens. Until now, no one knows why they, of all people, were chosen. Unwaveringly, they tell of their encounters with the Mother of Gods. Although atheism ruled in the communist Yugoslavia of that time, and the government hindered and fought religious life any way it could. They received the government's reprisals, and the public responded immediately. After only a few days, 20,000 faithful came to Medjugorje. They were all convinced that the Gospel appears here. After first doubts, priest Slavko also believed the reports of the seers and did his best to protect them from the government's sanctions. Meanwhile, the crowd of believers had become so large that the few priests of Medjugorje were hardly able to fulfill all their duties. After only a few months since the beginning of the appearances, Father Slavko came to Medjugorje to assist Father Jozo in his difficult task. Over and over, the seers had to tell the amazed and curious public of their encounters with the Gospel and deliver her messages to the faithful. In them, she essentially asked for a return to belief, prayer, and changing one's ways. In addition, she recommends penance and regular fasting. She says this is the only way that mankind can once again find peace. The psychologist Dr. Slavko Barbaric, who had just received his PhD, quickly found the task that was to challenge him for the rest of his life.
Those people who have accepted what happens here have certainly made progress in their faith. That also means taking steps towards peace and a new life within the family. Many communities have been formed and much healing has been done, physically as well as psychologically. That is certainly a lot, but in comparison to everything else in the world that is not so good, it is only a drop in the ocean.
When Father Slavko died unexpectedly of a heart attack on November the 24th, in the year 2000, a shock wave went through the media and the hearts of countless faithful all over the world. The 54-year-old was well known as the good soul of Medjugorje. His unbounding energy and numerous humanitarian projects had already turned him into a legend during his lifetime. There was deep sadness and pain, but the message that the seer Maria Pavlovich received the very next day gave many comfort.
The Gospel has told me that our brother Father Slavko has been born into heaven and is praying for us there.
I also believe him to be holy. When I look at his whole life, how he lived, his deeds and everything, then I know if anyone can be holy, then it is him.
The Catholic Church has not yet officially recognized the visions, and canonization is a long process. But Maria is certain.
The Gospel canonized him immediately on the 25th. He was someone who really lived sincerely according to her messages. Thus he grew into holiness directly.
He was a holy priest, a great, passionate priest who became light. He was a path and an example, a missionary, a brother, an inspiration. That is wonderful.
When Father Slavko left the parish office in the morning, pilgrims usually waited for him. In spite of a full schedule, he was always able to stay accessible to those seeking help.
For a donation for the poor, we said.
Yeah.
Where do we get that?
Here in the office.
Oh, here you go. Thank you.
The pictures of this film were taken shortly before his death. On the occasion of a television production about Medjugorje, we were allowed to accompany the busy Franciscan for a week with our camera. We experienced a priest who was able to link deep spirituality and mysticism with rational awareness of the problems of our time.
Das heißt, jeder Mensch hat Gaben, jeder Mensch möchte gut sein, dass es ihm gut geht, geliebt werden und lieben.
Everyone has talents and wants to be good, to be loved and to love. But often something happens and one walks on a false path. Yet the desire to be loved and accepted remains for everyone. When those who have drifted off onto wrong ways and have been injured come to the end of their way, they come into a community like Cenacolo. Here they find their way back to the good and are usually wonderful people. We celebrate Mass regularly with them. We sing and pray. For me, this is a proof that you can never condemn a person. It is never too late.
The members of the Cenacolo community are former drug addicts who were healed here. 3 times a week, Father Slavko visited them to celebrate Holy Mass. It was a constant challenge for Father Slavko to help suffering people. Authorities say that for no one else did he celebrate Mass with the same fervor and give as much time as to the members of the Cenacolo community, whom he very strongly wanted to bring back to Christ. Ora et labora, prayer and work, is the tenet with which the addicts are brought back into a life free of drugs. Most of them have a terrible past. They were emotionally, physically, and socially destroyed, and without any prospects for the future. This is no longer the case, thanks to the initiative of the founder sister Elvira, who cares for more than 600 people in 27 houses worldwide. In Medjugorje, Father Slavko oversaw the spiritual leadership of the boys, as they are called here. And he became not only their father confessor and priest, but also their confidant and friend to whom they could go at any time. In turn, the Franciscan could always turn to his boys when he needed strong hands for one of his ambitious projects. Those who are healed stay for 3 to 4 years with Cenacolo, which means school of life. Then they are ready to return to a normal life.
The therapeutic principle is the old rule of Benedict, the holy ora et labora, prayer and work. This community originated in Sister Elvira's heart, out of love for people who destroyed their lives.
Geboren worden im Herzen der Schwester Elvira.
When a young man comes here, a so-called guardian angel stays with him constantly, eats and works with him, and is just there for him on a permanent basis.
Ich konnte nicht schlafen, ich konnte einen Monat lang fast nicht schlafen. Ich habe immer 1-2 Stunden.
I couldn't sleep. That's how it is when you come off drugs. Every night before going to bed, he said, "Wake me up, I'll help you." When my guardian angel came and told me, "I like you with all your faults," I was content, even without a full wallet. Without tattoos or really hip clothes. And the same thing happened later on, when I forgave the boy whose guardian angel I was. I would have really loved to knock out his teeth when he insulted my family and provoked me. But then I said to myself, it doesn't matter. I insulted my guardian angel as well, and I was content. Then I realized that what is written in the gospel, all those big words that I never wanted to hear, that I was suddenly living them, and they are true. I was able to experience faith in the community.
The community's members produce everything themselves, beginning with building materials out of their quarry, up to their own fruits and vegetables. They bake their bread and build their own furniture. They call what happens in their community therapy by Christ. Father Slavko believes in mutual support and affection contrary to an achievement-oriented society.
There are more and more people who live on the fringes of society. They don't know what to do with their lives. And then come the dealers who sell drugs or other things which destroy people.
Ich kann mich nur wundern, dass wir als Kirche nicht.
I only wonder that we as the Church do not react more severely against the destruction of life, especially against the threat of drugs and other things which modern society unfortunately offers.
Leider moderne Gesellschaft anbietet.
Offers that many could not resist. But now Jesus has become the central figure in their lives. His love has saved them. They have learned that material goods are not very important and that humanity is more important than a career, money, or being high. Those with talent and interest can also become active as artists. Their works are then sold in the community's store.
Every year for Christmas, they prepare a so-called living manger. Then they regularly participate at youth festivals, where they bear witness in front of many young people. Sister Elvira always comes to this event, where we regularly present theater productions.
Bereiten immer ein Theater vor.
An effective start of a play that is one of the main attractions of Medjugorje's annual youth festival. Of course, the boys have made everything themselves, the production, stage set, and costumes. They worked on their interpretation of the story of salvation for months, an allusion to the seductive powers of drugs that they succumbed to and were saved from by Cenacolo. They openly bear witness in front of 15,000 pilgrims.
I used to shoot up heroin until I didn't know how to go on and was completely ruined. I didn't want to live anymore. Yes, I really wanted to die.
The founder of Cenacolo, Elvira Petrozzi, describes why the cooperation with Father Slavko was so successful.
Father Slavko was a man who shone not only through words, but also through deeds. He was filled through and through with love for the poorest of the poor and the weakest of the weak. He never denied a young man a request when one needed him, no matter if it was for Holy Mass, a confession, or just someone to talk to. Father Slavko was for us an irreplaceable co-worker and patron of the community. I also held him in high esteem personally. His modest and open manner made our work together simple and pleasant.
The introduction of the Youth Festival dates back to Father Slavko's initiative in 1989. It was modest and small in comparison to today's dimensions. International interest about what was going on here was awakened long ago, and Father Slavko did everything possible to do justice to the special circumstances. The visions had been going on for 8 years now. 4 of the seers still had them daily. They described their encounters with the Gospel over and over without fail. The seer Maria Pavlovich answers the questions of the pilgrims seriously and modestly. Father Slavko tried to accompany the seers as often as possible, to translate their statements when necessary into the 8 languages that he spoke. In the meantime, he had traveled a lot for the visions and had given hundreds of interviews to the press. But even as a speaker from Medjugorje, he never forgot his Franciscan vows.
He lived for the poor people and was completely committed to them. He lived very poorly himself. He had just 2 shirts, and when he traveled around the world, he always only had a small bag with him.
In der Welt herumreiste, hat nur eine einfache Börse gehabt und nicht viel.
He never cared for his looks. He was not at all vain. Because of this simplicity, he attracted people.
Diese Einfachheit, die hatte, hat die Leute auch an sich gezogen.
And so they came in hordes to reanimate their belief, to repent, and to confess. The visions took place daily at 6:40 p.m. in the church's small tower room where Father Slavko lived then. The psychologist Slavko Babaric occupied himself for a long time with the occurrences that took place during the visions. In a phenomenological study, he then published his findings.
Something happened here that, seen from a sociological point of view, meant that to 100% the group could not go on existing, that it had to break apart. All interests turned against the group. The organizer, Father Jozo, went to jail. We were accused of manipulating them. And the group itself was put under enormous pressure. Not only the individuals, but their families, and the whole parish as well. It was really the classic situation for a youth group to fall apart. But the seers were the only ones who were calm and always completely certain that everything would take a turn for the better.
The seer Ivanka Ivankovich Eles comes from Mostar. She is married and now has 3 children. Her father was a guest worker in Germany. Her daily vision stopped in 1985. At that time, she was entrusted with the last of the 10 secrets of the world's future. She may not talk about it. Ivanka has in the meantime completely withdrawn from the public. The Gospel now visits her once a year. Mirjana Dragicevic Soldo originally comes from Sarajevo. She had already been given all secrets in 1982 and since then has had no more daily visions. The Gospel told her she was now mature enough to go back to a normal life. She is also married and has 2 children now. Her husband Marco is a nephew of Father Slavko, who has a very close relationship with the couple. He visits them almost daily to discuss his plans and projects, for which he likes to get the advice of his nephew, an investment banker. Meanwhile, scientists from all over the world have devoted themselves to the visions. On Father Slavko's request, Professor Resch of the Institute for Paranormal Research has carried out various medical examinations.
We know that during the state of ecstasy, the sense of time and space disappears. During these examinations, we also questioned whether they would feel pain. We carried out numerous experiments, pricked them with needles, studied their pupil reflexes, and we found that they were not aware of anything earthly in this state.
The measurements of the brain currents and electroencephalograms show that the origins are not hallucinations or hysteria. And with the use of lie detector tests and hypnosis, the possibility of pretense has been excluded.
Now we have the medical confirmation that things here could not be easily explained. The phenomena as such are still something paranormal. It is nothing pathological and nothing controlled from the outside. Of course, there are many theories, such as hypnosis, telekinetics, or other things, but they are not viable. At least they do not hold up to detailed examinations. Science has reached its limits and recognized and confirmed it. The visions cannot be explained.
Ivan Dragicevic still sees the Gospel daily. He and the other seers view the spreading of the messages as their life's work.
The messages are mainly about working for peace. That is what we fast and do penance for. The gospel wants to help people find their way back to God.
But the call for freedom falls on deaf ears. The Croatian people mobilize to overthrow the communist oppressors. The result is a brutal war which almost ended the flow of pilgrims. Father Slavko took it as a divine sign that the war began almost 10 years to the day of the Gospel's first appearance.
For me, this is prophetic. 10 years after the Gospel's message on June 26, 1981, about peace, prayer, and fasting which can prevent war, suddenly war erupted. At that time, nobody thought of war. The communist structure was strong and well woven. There were no holes.
Today, only a few kilometers away from Medjugorje, traces of the horrible war can still be seen. Some of the 250,000 dead came from Medjugorje, although the town was not attacked directly. This fact gave rise to rumors that the gospel had saved the town. Father Slavko, who stayed here for the entire duration of the war, sees it in a more realistic light.
I know these kinds of stories, and my reaction to them was always anger. There are many people who were quick to say that Medjugorje was supposedly protected. One thing is certain. Although Medjugorje was not physically destroyed, it suffered all of war's consequences.
Soon after the war, more people than ever came to Medjugorje. As the priests prepare the Holy Mass, a sense of contemplation prevails. This mutual celebration under an open sky gives it a very special significance. The faithful are moved by moments of deep devotion and spiritual dedication, which results in an indescribable atmosphere. The Gospel has been appearing here for nearly 20 years now, longer than anywhere else in the world. And those who believe in it are a part of this atmosphere. The fruits that Medjugorje has produced can be seen all over the world. Numerous prayer groups have been founded and many people have made radical changes in their lives in order to devote themselves to God. For Father Slavko, this is a divine wonder.
Medjugorje ist wie eine Explosion gekommen. Und natürlich musste jemand...
Medjugorje came about like an explosion, and someone had to be there to channel it. Everything came from the mountain to the church, and we started to transform things into liturgical actions. We were prepared to hear confession and to pray with the pilgrims, to organize rosary and worship. Without the initial spark of the Seers, all of this certainly would not have come about. But without the church's interaction, nothing would have really become of it.
Kirche, sagen wir von uns hier, so wäre ebenso kaum was geworden.
This is how a movement of the masses came about through the interaction between Seers, Franciscans, and pilgrims, which fulfills a deep human longing to experience peace, love, and togetherness. Father Slavko cleverly combined traditional and modern aspects to make large events like this one attractive. The annual youth festival has now grown into a renowned event, attracting a colorful crowd of pilgrims from all over the world.
War ein Mensch von heute, ein Mensch, der in einer Zeit lebte, die...
He was a modern man, and he knew that he lived in a time of great changes. He knew how to link fundamental things from the past to fundamental things of the present. And he was not afraid to introduce several modern aspects to the pastoral in his youth work. Spiritually, he also had the courage to do things that others distance themselves from.
He was very much a bridge between the pilgrims and the parish and the work of Our Lady. He was a servant. On one side, he was observing the spirit of Medjugorje and translating it into human life and saying, this is what it means practically. This is what Our Lady wants. This is what we need to do. That is why we have his involvement in Cenacolo, in Mother's Village, because he was always translating the message of Our Lady into the needs of human beings.
The so-called Mother Village was the most current and certainly Father Slavko's largest humanitarian project. His direct response to the war in Bosnia, which left many thousand orphans in its wake, showed what can be done even without state-funded help. Within 2 years, a complex containing 8 buildings was built solely from donations. 115 children can live and eat here. They receive medical attention and spend their youth in good surroundings. At least once a day, Father Slavko comes to visit his children, who love him more than anything.
Im Krieg geschieht das, was wir schon alle wissen.
We all know what happens during war. There's much suffering on all levels, mainly for the children. Several years ago, a group of children suddenly met with the priests. The Franciscan sisters then cared for the children, and we rented a house.
Wir haben ein Haus rentiert.
In the meantime, I looked for something larger. Finally, we chose these grounds and called it Mother Village.
Dann haben wir diesen Platz hier ausgewählt, Mutterdorf genannt.
We didn't want an institution only for orphans, the sick or the old. We wanted to create an integral project.
dass es keine Institution gibt nur für die Waisenkinder, für die Kranken und für die Alten und so weiter, sondern wir wollten ein integrales Projekt.
Modern psychological knowledge, which the scientist Dr. Barbaric was always interested in, is put to use with the mother village as a social meeting center. Father Slavko's niece Lucia is a physical therapist. She has been working for the project since the beginning, and she works with handicapped children.
He assembled all of the co-workers and explained that we should treat all children as equally as possible. A group of healthy children should visit the handicapped on a regular basis and play with them. This results in a feeling of community and normalcy. Everyone and all generations should meet here and develop an understanding for the situation of others.
Schwanhild Henschel was one of 3 constant employees of the father. As a former private secretary of Robert Kennedy, this lady from Salzburg was very familiar with visionary projects.
Also der Wald ist ja so entstanden, das war vor 2 Jahren muss das gewesen sein.
This project originated 2 years ago. He took me aside and said, Schwani, I have an idea. I want to make something out of these woods. There was this circle of woods surrounding the mother village, and he walked ahead. It was a rainy day, and he kept getting caught in the bushes. We fought our way through this impenetrable undergrowth, and he said, I would like to lay out the park here, a lake there, and then we'll put up biblical figures. Can you imagine it? No, I said, I can't. You'll see, he answered. I'm going to the municipality of Chitluk to ask them. And he did. He talked to them and really begged for the woods. Finally, they gave them to him. He then had the area fenced in and cleared it off. It was more or less a garbage disposal. There was meter-high garbage in every hollow and every pit. He then got his boys, and they brought away the garbage and burned it. He had this vision, although none of us could imagine it. But I always say it was like the creation of the world.
The basis of the garden is the message of the Mother of God. Go to nature and discover the Creator's traces, which means that nature should help us perceive God's creation and to meet with Him. Father Slavko wanted to create some streams in reference to the Garden of Eden.
Für uns hier ist das eigentlich eine konkrete Antwort auf die Botschaft von Frieden. Natürlich, Maria ruft uns auf.
For us, this is a concrete response to the message of peace. Of course, Mary appeals to us to pray and fast, and we should do that. But if you really want to do something for peace, you must do more. You have to become active. If a person wants to do something for peace, he has to make sure to be just and to accept people, especially the sick, the abandoned and the injured. Otherwise, there can be no peace. I see the children that come from the war to us, and not only those, but also the children that have become victims of a war within the family. And sometimes they have deeper wounds than the children from the classical war.
Nicht nur die, sondern wir haben Kinder, die Opfer der Familienkriege geworden sind. Manchmal bringen sie zu uns tiefere Wunden als die Kinder aus dem klassischen Krieg.
Single mothers also had their own special place in the concept of the mother village. Their children are to play and grow up together with the others at the huge natural playgrounds that are being built.
Das ist auch unser Kampf für das Leben, auch gegen die Abtreibung. Ich sage schon,
that is our struggle for life and against abortion. When women do not know where they can go, they make the terrible decision to abort.
Furchtbare Entscheidung, das Leben zu töten. Vielleicht weniger.
Maybe we don't need to talk so much, but give help to those who want to give life. We wanted to give them a place to live.
Sadly, Mirjana and Marco walked through the mother village, which they actively helped create. They are both determined to continue the ambitious project.
Ovdje na ovoj livadi, na sred livade, zamislili smo jednu kapelicu.
Also, Father Slavko is no longer among us in the physical sense. His spirit will always live on in us.
To je bila naša ideja I to ćemo ostvariti na sred.
Marco and I did a lot of work with him, and we feel obligated to translate our mutual dreams into action. We want to build a chapel here, and we have also planned on an old people's home and various other facilities. Using all of our strength and love, we try to finish everything as he had envisioned. We are not thinking of something ostentatious, just a small, modest chapel, just as he would have liked it.
Zaista on to želio sa svim srcem, jer on, kao I mi, živio je za ovo majčino selo.
A small town with its own church, school, and retirement center, all surrounded by a park with many animals and a paddock for hippotherapy. Before, the area used to be a garbage dump, a project which cost millions, planned and financed in the firm belief of divine providence.
Nije nikada volio razgovarati o novcu. Nije nikada smatrao...
Money was never important to him. He didn't like to talk about it at all. When he received money, he would only ask, "Can we build an old people's home with it? Will it be enough? How much more do we need?" Money automatically meant using it for something good.
Money was never a problem for him, because it didn't matter to him. He knew exactly what he wanted, and if he was convinced about something, then there were no problems.
I remember what Father Slavko told us when he had the idea for the mother village. He went to the Mountain of Visions, and at the second station, where Mary visits Elizabeth, somebody approached him. The stranger gave him a check and said it was for the realization of the mother village that he had heard about and wanted to support. Father Slavko thanked him and answered that the money was not as important as what the man had just told him.
Mirjana's annual appearance was always a happy event for Father Slavko. When the weather is good, it takes place on a playing field. The field is crowded hours before the seer appears and has her meeting with the Mother of God. The daughter of an X-ray technician is the only seer with a university education. She is usually very emotionally moved when she has her visions. In earlier times, she often fainted. Since 1987, Mirjana can hear the Gospel's voice also on the second day of the month and sometimes sees her as well. During these occasions, the 36-year-old prays especially for the unbelieving.
I'm beginning to get 3 complexes here. I'm always together with those that see, and I see nothing. Just like the ones that hear with the heart, and I hear nothing. And then I experience the ones that are constantly taking pictures and think they have photographed something supernatural. And then there's no film in the camera. I think Mary could have appeared to me as well, but she never did.
The church is without a doubt also the social center of Medjugorje. Priest Ivan Seer and Maria Dragicevic, who was also a constant employee of Father Slavko, welcomed the congregation to a performance of the local children's choir. The Seers insist on attending this event. Here everything began when they were children. They always stayed in close contact with the parish and with their spiritual advisor, Father Slavko, whose work is intertwined with the Church of Medjugorje. And the colleagues must now do without their most experienced associate. They know that it is impossible to fill the void that the death of the selfless, charismatic personality has left behind.
Mislim da je to uistinu bio jedan velikan I kao čovjek.
I believe Father Slavko to be a really great man, monk and priest. He was a great gift for all of us. Not only for the Franciscan community, but also for the church in Herzegovina, and especially for Medjugorje. He had immense talents and he used them to an optimum to realize his goals. And he sacrificed himself for his consuming work.
He was a man who suffered strongly within himself. But only a very few were able to see that. Only those that knew him well and for a long time could see the fire burning within him. On the outside, he selflessly gave himself to others. Through his love for Jesus, he succeeded in loving the people around him just as much. One had the feeling that he gave you all of his time, that there was nobody else.
Da ne postoji više niko na ovoj kugli zemaljskoj osim tebe I on te sluša, daje ti svoje vrijeme.
A travel group from Italy is waiting in front of the church for Vicka Ivankovic. The 36-year-old is always friendly and has made many friends among the pilgrims because of her open and warm nature. She is still unmarried and is thinking about joining a convent. Whenever she is not traveling to give lectures about the gospel, she works for various humanitarian projects, such as this orphan's home, in an honorary capacity. She also sees her task in continuing the work of Father Slavko.
Tako zbilja, ja jedno mogu reći da sam zbilja presretna.
I have to say that I was fortunate in having known such a great and yet so modest person. His death left us a clear sign. He was a living example that we can and should follow. Also, he is no longer alive. I feel his presence very clearly and closely. I hear him calling to us, continue on this path. I have stopped, but you must continue that which we have begun.
And so she hands out noodles donated from Germany, left over in the mother village, to the needy orphanages of the poor neighboring communities.
We all do that because of ourselves.
Jakov Cholo can also not complain about a lack in the pilgrims' interest. Today, he is telling them about how his daily vision stopped in 1998 and how he suffered because of it. Jakov, at 30 years of age, is the youngest of the Seers. He married an Italian and now has 3 children. For some time now, he is running a guest house and lives in a very retired fashion. He tries to keep his family out of public interest as much as possible. As Jakov's parents died when he was young, he was especially close to Father Slavko.
Pa ja mislim, Slavko je dao cijeli život ovdje na Medjugorje.
Father Slavko's life was Medjugorje. He always tried to solve the many problems that arose from the special situation here. He was always loyal and never denied us. He was never ashamed to speak of the gospel as the Queen of Peace and of her messages. And we all know that he really lived according to them. Medjugorje and Father Slavko have become 2 names that are inseparable. And I'm very happy for him that he can now finally see the gospel himself. He was always so curious about her.
Since 20 years, the pilgrims have come without fail to the Seers, at least one of which is always in Medjugorje. Vicka Ivankovic greets them regularly on the steps to her house. Her father was also a guest worker in Germany. She has 7 siblings. She broke off her training as a textile merchant, and she entrusts her future to the gospel. She always answers the same questions good-naturedly. How does the gospel look? What does she wear? What did she say? Because of a serious illness, which she describes as expiatory suffering, her visions have become irregular. She sometimes sees the Mother of God in the afternoon, sometimes at night. Father Slavko studied the Seers' characters from childhood on. They are a very mixed group, theologically as well as psychologically. Their selection will remain a secret of divine providence.
Ein besonderes Kompliment gilt der Mutter Gottes für den Mut, dass sie genau diese 6 Seher genommen hat.
My compliments to the Gospel for choosing exactly these 6 seers. If I had to put a group of people together, I would never choose these 6. I don't even know if I would select any one of them. They're all so different from one another that they could not form a group on sociological or anthropological terms.
So auf der anthropologischen Basis nie eine Gruppe geworden.
They are not enemies, but they have never become real friends either. They don't even do things together, and yet they're always in complete agreement about the messages. Then, they are always with each other and for each other.
Das absolut immer so miteinander und füreinander.
Maria Pavlovich often experiences her visions at home with some friends and priests. The trained hairdresser has 5 brothers and sisters. Her parents are farmers. As a child, she was exceptionally pious.
Zdravo Mario, milosti puna, Gospodin s tobom.
Although she originally wanted to join a convent, she married an Italian. Now the 36-year-old commutes between Medjugorje and Monza, where her 3 children can lead normal lives. On the 25th of every month, Maria receives a message for the whole world, which she then usually put into writing with Father Slavko's help and published.
About 3 or 4 days before his death, I asked him to always be there in the future when I received the messages. I knew that they were something holy for him. He translated them into all kinds of languages and was very strict about making sure that not a single word was changed. He paid attention to every comma and all of the small details. If she said in a message the word materialism, then it stayed materialism and did not become consumer-oriented or something else. He was absolutely convinced that the gospel appeared and that she spoke in her words, not another seer's or mine. I could feel very strongly that he always received them with respect and humility.
Of all the seers, Ivan Dragicevic moved away furthest from Medjugorje. He also comes from a farmer's family and now commutes between Boston and Medjugorje. Since 1994, he is married to an American with whom he has 2 children. Upon hearing of Father Slavko's death, Ivan returned to Medjugorje as soon as he could. This evening, he has his vision. He still experiences them daily with his family. Ivan once wanted to become a professional soccer player, and later a Franciscan monk. Meanwhile, he has traveled the whole world in order to speak about the gospel. And there is much interest. In the US, it is not rare for 10,000 people to come to large cities when Ivan experiences his vision in public. Father Slavko was Ivan's confessor for 17 years. Hardly anyone else knew the seer as well. Ivan is especially grateful for his help in the early years when the children were made to feel the harsh wind of the communist system. Ivan sadly acknowledges the void that the death of the beloved Franciscan has left.
Fra Slavku je teško govoriti. Ono što je radio je sa toliko ljubavi.
It's not easy for me to speak about Father Slavko. He did everything with so much love and energy. In the 18 years that he was here, he always tried to give the world the gospel's messages. He didn't want to be anything more than an instrument of God, just as we are. And Father Slavko was a man who gave himself completely to God and the gospel. That much is clear.
Besides numerous essays and articles, a total of 16 books, which were translated into more than 20 languages, originated in Father Slavko's small office. For once, he speaks about himself.
Ik ben in een familie geboren hier in Medjugorje.
I was born in the area of Medjugorje as the fourth of 6 children. When I was in elementary school, I was already thinking of becoming a priest. Then I was in the Jesuit high school in Dubrovnik, and after that, I joined the Franciscans. I studied philosophy for 1 year and then did 2 years of military service. I then studied theology in Sarajevo and in Graz. I was ordained in Innsbruck, and then I came to Chaplina. That was in 1973. I was chaplain there for 5 years until 1978. Then I went to Freiburg and finished my studies and got my PhD. My subject was a change in the education of adults. And in 1982 I came to Medjugorje.
Tomislav Pervan was Medjugorje's priest for 6 years. He comes from a neighboring village and is just as old as his childhood friend Slavko. Pervan, who today is the provincial in Mostar, remembers their mutual beginnings.
We had a leaning towards the holy, the sacred, and to the altar. Father Slavko and I already knew in elementary school that we would join the Franciscans.
Another project of the tireless priest is called Domus Pacis, House of Peace. Father Slavko brought this model to life in order to offer shelter and help to the suffering souls that could not be admitted to Cenacolo. A few words of encouragement and off he goes. Because of his appointments, today's visit is a short one.
Diese Gruppe von den jungen Männern sind eigentlich eine sehr gemischte Gruppe.
The group of men here is a very mixed one. They are people who can't be at home or join a community. I started to work with them.
Diese Arbeit mit denen angefangen und Drogen oder
Most of them have problems with alcohol, drugs, or of a psychiatric nature.
die auch einige psychische Probleme haben und wir versuchen sie
What we do is we try to create a normal living environment for them.
wieder Lebensatmosphäre zu schaffen.
It started about 3 years ago. A boy came out of Zagreb, out of a very bad situation. The father was already an alcoholic. He asked Father Slavko for help and was taken in. That somehow became known, and more boys came, until there were about 20. They were the workers' troop, and Father Slavko guided them spiritually. They always had to come to the prayer hour and to the Croatian morning mass.
Afterwards, there was always a meeting around the priest's office. Then he talked about the day's program with them, where they should work, depending on what they could do, because some were psychologically sick and were not able to do a lot. He divided them into different groups and put them to use accordingly. He told me, "Schwani, you make sure that they really do that." And so I ran after the boys all day and made sure that they really did what Father Slavko wanted them to do.
Und er hat dann zu mir gesagt, du Schwani, und du schaust jetzt, dass sie das auch wirklich machen. Naja, und dann bin ich ihnen halt den ganzen Tag so nachgelaufen, den Burschen, und habe geschaut, ob sie auch wirklich das tun, was der Vater Slavko wollte.
Activity on all levels. Today, a taping appointment for Radio Mir is on the full engagements diary. Father Slavko hosts 3 shows for the religious station, which is broadcast all over the country. From here, he leads a virtual prayer group where the listeners can hear and learn what is of importance. Besides that, he also hosts a game show that introduces children to the Bible in an easy manner. The main theme of these shows is, of course, the gospel, or messages and their dissemination.
I work here on the messages, which I compare to biblical texts. Whoever wants to help gets a message read to them and then has to find the corresponding passage in the Holy Scriptures. We give out small prizes, which is a special encouragement for the children. Naturally, our purpose in radio is to spread the messages. But our main goal is, of course, what else could it be, to get to know the Bible better.
In the future, Milenko Stojic, the chief editor, will have to do without his prominent co-worker, without whom things would have gone quite differently in Medjugorje.
Slavko je bio onaj koji je Medjugorje, rekao bih, stavio jedne određene okvire.
Father Slavko was the one who gave Medjugorje a work format. Through his work, he really gave the name Medjugorje a direction. At first, people asked themselves, what is happening there? Is it real or not? And then some tried to take the occurrence for themselves and their purposes. I would even say try to privatize them. But then Father Slavko came and was able to prevent exactly that kind of thing. He wanted Medjugorje to be for the good of all people.
When I think back to Slavko's activities, and then later in Medjugorje, says his former university professor, and sum them up, I am convinced that God planned on Father Slavko's co-work, just as he planned the appearances themselves. He came at the very beginning, was well prepared with a solid education in theology, deep faith and impeccable behavior as a priest. It was as if he had been called, as if everyone had waited for him.
It was his path to go into history in this manner. From the small, meaningless work that he began in his parishes, up to the great apostolic works that in the end were of huge importance for the whole world. The mass media's reaction says it all. Father Slavko is beheld as an apostle on all continents, in all cultures, and for all the people.
An air of festivity at the Cenacolo community. A new house is being opened, this time for girls and women with drug problems. Grateful parents have come from all over to properly celebrate their daughters' new lives and to thank the organizers of the community. Father Slavko appears punctually on the scene to bless the house, celebrate Holy Mass, and give a speech. In the last months of his life, several serious trials awaited the priest. The conflict with his responsible bishop in Mostar, who did not believe the visions to be supernatural, had escalated to such an extent that he had forbidden the Franciscan to give the sacrament of confession. This was an especially hard blow to Father Slavko, as he was a very sought-after and popular father confessor, and the sacrament of repentance and forgiveness was especially important to him. Besides, he was supposed to be transferred, but it did not come to that anymore. Many believe that the gospel prevented that. On the outside, Father Slavko's bitterness about the repressions was not noticeable. He completely trusted that everything was part of the divine plan and that the gospel would lead him accordingly. And so he thanks the Mother of God once more in a speech and blesses the new project. Father Slavko was always concentrated on the essentials. Deeds and results were of greater importance to him than long-winded speeches. Small talk was a nightmare for him, and so he leaves the party, as so often, before the worldly part begins. The next appointment is already waiting. Worship at 9 p.m. at church is on the program. Father Slavko quickly brings in his boys, none of whom want to miss these special hours of prayer. Patiently, the faithful wait for the popular priest, and more people crowd into the church, which is soon full to the last seat. At this point, Father Slavko has been on his feet for over 17 hours, and the day is far from being over. But weariness, vacation, or rest are foreign words to him. He was always available for showing people the way to God. A last glance at the clock and it can begin. And an instruction to the band, also mostly boys from Cenacolo, who accompany the ritual with their playing. The worship, which Father Slavko himself developed in this form, begins with the removal of the Blessed Sacrament from the tabernacle. He then takes the microphone and goes into position behind the altar, on his knees. The deep humility that he shows moves many people, and it is said that many have rediscovered their faith at that moment. The prayer is not complicated and is given in different languages. Father Slavko, who has been invited by presidents, ministers, philosophers, bishops, and generals, and whose advice is valued by artists, millionaires, lawyers, and scientists, here clearly shows what is of true value to him. Humility before the greatness of God. He was never interested in his own success, nor particularly impressed by other people's. During his worship, his unending willingness to serve God completely is noticeable. It is direct and without compromise. Emotion is perceptible amongst the faithful. They understand that they have a true servant of the Lord in front of them, who is a stranger to excessive piousness hierarchy, and moral cowardice. Father Slavko was authentic in all of his actions, and that made his spirituality so credible. Marinko Shakuta is the son of a good friend of Father Slavko's. He came to worship on a regular basis and would have probably never become a Franciscan without the priest's example. Marinko always admired the unusual appeal that Father Slavko had for people.
One could say that his worship was very close to the people. I remember one case when young people came from Split. That was on a Sunday, on which worship does not normally take place. They didn't know that and asked me about it. Unfortunately, I had to answer them that worship had taken place on the Saturday before. They were very sad because they had come extra for the worship all the way from Split, about 150 kilometers. This kind of prayer was especially popular. Everyone could pray along. It was very informal. Young people, old people and children, everybody could participate. It was a beautiful way of praying, which meant a lot to me as well.
Es eine schöne Gebetsweise, die für mich auch sehr wichtig.
Father Ivan Landeka is on his way to the apartment of his deceased friend. He was Medjugorje's priest for 12 years of close cooperation. He is the only one to have a key to the modest apartment that now might become a museum. The Franciscan colleagues had already become used to Father Slavko's huge work mania, which was not deterred by friends' illness or other adverse conditions.
Es war für ihn immer selbstverständlich, dass
It was natural to him to lead prayer in front of the Blessed Sacrament. After we had all eaten, he also came to the presbytery. Then he took a little time off, maybe spent an hour or 1.5 with us, and then he went back to his office to work some more.
Verbrachte mit uns vielleicht 1,5 Stunden noch und dann ging wieder in sein Arbeitszimmer zu arbeiten.
Even the few hours left were then used efficiently at the desk, until finally a small rest pause followed. 3 to 4 hours of sleep daily had to be enough, for then the new day's challenges were already planned.
Like on the 24th of November, which was to change Medjugorje so fundamentally. In a good mood, Father Slavko congratulated Franz Golovic from Austria, who had just undertook his 250th pilgrimage to Medjugorje. It is 9 a.m. as Father Slavko greets the pilgrims.
It is good to know that Mary says you are all important to me. Without you, I can do nothing.
None of the people present foresee that it would be the last Mass that Father Slavko celebrated in this life. Only a few pilgrims are present on this morning as he speaks of the Gospel for the last time and gives Holy Communion to the pilgrims. Afterward, he hosted a show for Radio Mir. Then he met his co-worker, Rita Falsetto, and some pilgrims in order to ascend to the Cross Mountain, like every Friday. Rita, one of the constant employees, had previously come to Medjugorje with the American Peace Corps. When Father Slavko asked her to work with him, she just stayed on. She was there on November 24th at 3:30 p.m. when, after the ascent, the unexpected happened.
We came up doing the Way of the Cross, and Father Slavko finished praying, but it was unusual for him usually. He stopped by the resurrection station, and it was unusual for him because usually he would walk up to the main cross and pray Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory Be. But this day he remained at the bottom of the cross near the resurrection station and prayed only one Our Father, and he prayed specifically for the souls in purgatory. And everyone dispersed. Some of the pilgrims went to pray in other places, but Father Slavko then by himself went up and made a circle and walked around the large cross and then came down. And all of a sudden, Father Slavko walked a few more steps where I'm standing here, and he kind of just slowly placed himself down on the ground. As I went over, he fell into my arms, and I was trying to find his pulse, and there was no pulse. And then at the same time, a doctor had been coming up to pray, and he came and checked Father Slavko's eyes and said that he could do nothing, and that he was gone. Our Lady had asked him to sacrifice his life for Medjugorje, and he could never say no to Our Lady.
In the small village of Dragicevic, a few kilometers away, Slavko Barbaric was born 54 years ago. The family Barbaric is in mourning. They can hardly believe that the beloved member of their family was taken away so abruptly. Although the father had also died of an early heart attack, no one had expected anything of the sort in this case. Of course, today all of their thoughts center on the deceased. They leaf through a photo album to call back some of the moments that ended much too quickly. The mother still remembers exactly how it all began.
I remember that already as a child, he would meet with Father Toma on occasion. He spent a lot of time there, and I said to him, I need you here as well. Your father is dead and your brother Josso with the army. Then I realized how important it was to him, and I went to Father Bubalo and told him that the little one wanted to join the monks.
When he went to school, he always had time to visit the Franciscans. I often told him, we are a large family with many children. There is always something to do. He would then help, but still spend more time with the monks than at home. One day, as we were working together, he said to me, "Brother, I must go now."
Father Janko asked me then whether I had urged him to this decision. No, I said, it is his own wish. I only pray that he will then stay there.
At that time, it was common for one son of a large family to become a priest, but good health was a requirement. His sister-in-law Ivica remembers.
His eyes were a big problem then. He was often in pain and was afraid that he would be turned away because of his sight defect. He told me then, I don't know what will become of me if I cannot become a priest. I feel such an immense longing for the priesthood. His eyes were treated for 1 month and then finally he could join the brothers.
After that, he did not have much time for the family anymore.
Later, he did more for Medjugorje than he did for himself. When he came to visit, he usually had only a little bit of time. He drank 1 coffee, smoked a cigarette with us, and then he had to leave. He was really always on the go.
And he never looked after himself. 2 months ago, he came into the mother village with a bad rash on his hands. As I was familiar with the illness from my father, I knew that it has to be treated immediately. But he just waved it off and said, "Oh, don't worry, the Holy Ghost will heal it." He had more serious illnesses lately and had very many colds, but every time I said something, he just waved me off and didn't want to hear about it. I think his life was at an end because he had completely exhausted it. What 3 people who become 80 do in the course of their lives, he did in his short one.
The body was laid out in public for 2 days. Relatives and friends, some of whom came from far away, all had the opportunity to say goodbye. It was especially hard for the 87-year-old mother to bury her own son. Now the coffin is closed, and a funeral procession, which would have been an honor for any statesman, starts to move. Not only close colleagues, companions, and clergymen came from all over for the last cortege, in spite of the great difficulty involved in traveling on short notice to the further regions of Herzegovina. Even Ratko Peric, the bishop from Mostar, is here. Nobody had expected that, as the conflict between him and Father Slavko had clearly escalated in the last months.
Oca I Sina I Duha Svetoga. Mir vama.
Ivanka Ivankovich Eles, who normally avoids public appearances completely, is here as well, in the very back.
We grew up together then and grew into this province. We carried each other and worked together closely when I was a priest here in Medjugorje. 6 lead-heavy communist years that we did our work under inhuman conditions, with God's help. But then the communist, ungodly world collapsed, and the morning of a new freedom dawned for the Croatian people and the whole world.
Dear Father Slavko, in your life you experienced not only essence, you also received blows. Lately it has been especially hard for you. You have had much grief, and I know that it hurt you and that you suffered with it. Sometimes you avoided it. Otherwise, you left everything to time and to the just judge.
The bishop burns incense over the coffin. He has nothing personal to say about the deceased. Since over 100 years, a conflict smolders in Herzegovina between the church and the Franciscans. The relations have not exactly improved with the visions that made Medjugorje, of all places, famous. Like his predecessor, Bishop Peric does not believe in these visions. Even in Rome, they are controversial. Yet in the Catholic Church, there are numerous supporters of Medjugorje and the fruits it has borne. Even the Pope takes a benevolent view. But in Rome, personal visions are on principle only sanctified after they have been concluded and examined accordingly, and that can take a while. Then it's the young people's turn. The Friends of Talent thank their patron with luxuriant floral wreaths. It is an organization that supports very talented but poor students.
Dear Father Slavko, in the name of the organization Friends of Talent Medjugorje and in the name of all 10 generations of students for whom you have made thousands of grants possible and whom you have helped grow spiritually, we want to express our infinite gratitude. With deep sadness, we say farewell to you, the creator of the idea and the founder of this organization, our admired and beloved President, Father Slavko.
Boris Vidovic, who had an especially close relationship to the priest, speaks for the boys of Cenacolo.
The sudden death on Cross Mountain shocked us all. But this death, which is so similar to Jesus' death, gives us the hope that the Lord chose the right time. We thank you, Father Slavko, for your prayer that was so persevering and so powerful, for the long watches you kept and the worship on your knees, and for always setting an example for us.
15,000 visitors came to Medjugorje on this rainy day to give their last respects to Father Slavko, the man whose name had become inseparable from the movement which started here. In tears, Yakov Cholo now says farewell and expresses gratitude in the name of the Seers for the great love with which Father Slavko fulfilled his mission.
Ti si, brate, sad dosadio, ti koji si